please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started.
We're going to go into a question. So this is from Crimson Air. Do the deleterious mutations not apply to single-celled organisms? If so, how are they still intact after 6,000 years? SFT, that's pointed to you.
Great question. So I actually wrote about this extensively in my book. Genetic Entropy was written for longer-lived mammals, right? Your elephants, your humans, your chimpanzees. They are on the verge of extinction. Okay, deleterious mutation accumulation will degenerate larger mammals. Now, when it comes to your bacteria, well, bacteria have incredibly short generation times, massive population sizes. Okay, so there's a number of reasons where they may be able to fight off genetic degeneration. But what's funny is, considering that fact, you can look to the Lenski experiment, where the Lenski experiment demonstrates that bacterial populations actually do undergo a sort of genetic degeneration, what's called reductive evolution, where in order to adapt, they will lose genes. Okay, they're losing genes short term for adaptive purposes, but it's long-term degeneration. And his bacterial populations, believe it or not, what they did was they shrank in functional genome sizes. They're lazy, they're handicapped, they're cornered essentially, where if they were put into any other environment, they would die off. They'd go extinct immediately, essentially. But also, I'll point this out, is bacteria, they have a very, very low mutation rate. And no one's going to argue that the number of bacteria in the world is clearly massive. I mean, over 1 quadrillion easily. So all of these factors considered, this is the perfect recipe for natural selection to purify. And yet we still see with these long-term bacterial experiments, we still see reductive evolution. And the last thing I'll say, viruses, there's an incredible paper in the secular literature too, from Dr. John Sanford, Dr. Robert Carter, where they identified that the H1N virus went from a red hot pandemic to a whimper to an extinction event, all because of genetic degeneration. So that, I'll yield there.
Yeah, so Bill, if you want to quickly respond to that, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, he admitted that bacteria might be able to fight off these deleterious mutations, and there's lots of them, so it's a good place for selection. Yeah, that's evolution. So I don't know why you're denying it. They kept bringing up this Lenski experiment. I haven't read that experiment, but I do know that bacteria exist within a microbiome. It's an invisible ecosystem that we can't see, but it even includes our bodies. We're constantly exchanging bacteria with the environment, and bacteria are in constant interaction with everything in their environment. So if you take some out of their environment and you have them in this sterile lab, I don't know why you'd expect them not to just get sick and die. Like, that's not an experiment in their natural ecosystem of the microbiome. So I don't really see why that should demonstrate anything.
So it's directed to you, SFT, if you want to quickly finish up on that
I'll get the last
question.
word on this one, since it was for me. So I can see why he doesn't understand the concept of genetic entropy, and why he pretty much just glosses over the massive number of papers and references that I had from population geneticists that are not young Earth creationists, that are acknowledging this problem of very slightly deleterious mutations accumulating. Now, if you read their papers, the rescue devices that they look to, which Bill is not aware of because he's not up to date. He's not up to date on the literature. They look to synergistic epistasis, truncation selection, mutation count mechanism, a bunch of different mechanisms that have actually been falsified. They fail. So the fact is, genomes have shelf lives, and it limits the age of genomes, and it destroys universal common ancestry. He didn't get my point about bacteria. Let's say you've got more than 1 quadrillion bacteria. Go with that number. There's probably way more than that. But let's say their generation time is every 30 minutes. They're born, they grow up, they have kids, they have a family, okay? So if the generation time is every 30 minutes, and we've got all of those bacteria, well, we've got over 1 quadrillion bacteria dead every 30 minutes. So that type of reproduction rate seen in bacteria is ideal and perfect for natural selection. I'd like to ask Bill, do people reproduce that way? Of course not. Imagine we reproduce the same way bacteria did. We've got 7 or 8 billion people in the world today. If the population doubled every 30 minutes just to keep the population stable, you'd have to kill off 7 or 8 billion people every 30 minutes. So this whole argument from bacteria is silly, it's a joke, and it's a misunderstanding of genetic degeneration, which is a very real problem that Bill needs to study.